go. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, we've been doing these non-breeding surveys for probably about 6 or 7 years now. And the reason why we were doing this is because we wanted to understand what was happening at the tail end of the breeding season. For example, we wanted to know when are these birds leaving for their winter grounds, and where are they, or when they're leaving as well. And so for the birds that stay here in South Sound, we want to know what colonies that they're being observed at. Now, we do know that in general, if we look at sort of a calendar view from September through May, September, October, we don't really see a whole lot. September is probably the 1 month out of the whole season that's one of the more important ones, because that is the tail end of the season, and it gives us a chance to see some of the fledglings from the summer. And we don't see fledglings at every single colony, but it is nice to be able to see that, because it kind of gives us a glimpse into guessing, okay, well, we assume that this colony had at least one successful nest. We can't say that all the nests are successful, but a fledgling is kind of that living proof of, okay, we've got something going on here. And then as we start transitioning from the fall into the winter, it definitely slows down a lot, because these birds, they typically migrate to their wintering grounds rather quickly. And even though they molt into their non-breeding plumage, pretty much once the season's done, oddly enough, they kind of disappear. We don't know where they really go to do this. We don't see very many transitional birds in the fall, as opposed to in the spring. So yeah, once we get into winter, it's kind of this very quiet period. So it is definitely that sort of meditative time. And then once we get into January, it's like someone flipped the switch, and then all of a sudden we start seeing birds that are completely in their breeding plumage again. So some birds do not stay in their non-breeding plumage for very long. And then the process of birds showing up with breeding plumage, that's a pretty extended affair that continues on into March. And then by April, we definitely see a pretty good number of breeding birds that are coming in closer. They're not quite yet to spending time on the beach or by the bluffs, but by May, that's probably one of the most active times of year in general. We see birds on the beach, we see mating, we see ledge sitting, we see burrow visits. I mean, in my opinion, May is probably one of the better times to be out, just for the sheer amount of activity that you would see. And we do some preseason surveys that can double as our quote unquote winter surveys. So that's kind of how the season progresses. And so by doing these surveys over that whole time frame, we not only can identify when these birds leave, but also when they return. And if we're able to determine any sort of change in the timing, that's something that we can look at and see if it's something that bears paying closer attention to. Is there something that might be affecting that? Some things we might not be able to control. I mean, really, most of the things we don't. So we're really just observing these changes. But once we transition to the summer surveys, then when you combine that data with our winter data, we get what we assume to be a pretty complete picture of kind of the overall life cycle for our local birds. So with that said, we're going to go into the protocol here. So let me get that launched here. Okay, so we kind of covered some of the goals that this particular aspect of the surveys is intended to cover. So where do they go in the off season? I will mention quickly for those of you who did not get a chance to catch the talk that Mike Johns gave at the last the last Salish Sea Guillemot Network meeting. Mike Johns is with Point Blue Conservation Science. They are a research outfit down in California, based out of the Farallon Islands, right off the coast of San Francisco. And they've been doing seabird research for decades. So they have a really big data set. But more recently, they've actually been doing some tagging work, and they've actually tagged their birds, and they have tracked the migration of these birds. And their birds actually go all the way up to the Strait of Juan de Fuca for the winter. And then they come back in the spring. So it was really cool to see some of that data, and just the fact that there is this sort of regional migration to our backyard, so to speak. And then one of the secondary goals that we are also looking at is when the birds change plumage. Like I mentioned, it's a very quick transition, both from breeding to non-breeding and then back to breeding. They don't all do it at the same time, but it is interesting to see when that change happens, and then when they return to their colonies as well, because that's also another important piece of information. We know that there are some colonies that tend to be earlier timed, and that's why some of these winter surveys and or preseason surveys can be really key in documenting some of those activities. So yeah, most of the breeding happens during the traditional June, July, August timeframe. But yeah, we do have a couple colonies where they're just a little more excited. So, all right, getting into the protocol here. So the biggest difference from breeding surveys is the winter surveys are once a month, which is kind of nice. Doesn't mean you can't go down to the beach more often. It just means that we really only need data officially once a month. And it's probably good to try and go around the same time. We used to encourage people to take photos at every outing. I do realize that may not always be necessary because maybe nothing changed. So one of the adjustments that we're making is just suggesting that if you're walking the colony and you notice, something has changed, you can take pictures of that. And then, make notes that, okay, the rest of the colony looks the same. That way we don't get inundated with a whole bunch of photos. But the idea of having the photos is to be able to document changes in the habitat over time. The reason for this is because we used to be in that sort of position where Anne and I and the interns, whoever else was coming out with us during the site visits in the spring, we were just like, okay, well, I swear there used to be a burrow here, and we didn't have it documented. So we were just relying on our memory, which sometimes gets harder to remember what was or wasn't there, and whether there was vegetation or whatnot. So it's like to say, pictures are 1,000 words. So pictures, if you have them, great, send them, and that really is helpful. As far as going out to survey, generally speaking, we leave it up to the volunteers to organize themselves. If you do, however, find that you are unable to go, please try and give us as much advance notice as you can, so that way we can make arrangements for subbing. And if you're interested in being a sub, in addition to doing your regular surveys at whatever colony you're doing, please reach out to us. We love the opportunity to have kind of that cross-pollination. Again, like with the summer breeding surveys, surveys should be done no later than 9 o'clock. Now, I probably should put in here that the surveys only need to be 30 minutes. They can be as short as 15 minutes, but I feel like 30 minutes is pretty easy to do, especially if you spend time walking the length of your colony. You can almost easily knock out 15 minutes right there, as long as you're not trying to do a brisk jog up and down the beach. That's a different objective. But definitely take the time to look for the birds, look at the condition of the bluffs, and then as you go, make notes of what you're seeing. Obviously, one of the more important aspects of this survey is count however many pigeon guillemots you see out there. Now, we don't know whether you're going to encounter just non-breeding or a combination of breeding and non-breeding. During the fall, you might see some of those fledglings too. And then in the spring, you might get lucky and you might see some of those splotchy transitional birds. We don't really see too many of those, but those I think are really interesting to see because, aside from them being uncommonly seen, it kind of gives us some insight into when these birds are kind of getting ready for their breeding season. We do definitely feel like a spotting scope is very helpful in some of this work, especially this time of year where we do get a lot of other seabirds that are mixed in. They're all black and white. So thankfully we have Shannon and Anne here to really help us in trying to distinguish the different birds apart. But again, sometimes these pigeon guillemots, they can be a little bit ways out there, and maybe the seas are just a little bit choppy, and maybe it's a little bit misty out, or it's a little bit gray out, or whatever the conditions are, they're not always going to be the best. And so if you don't have a spotting scope and you need one, we just got ours repaired and it's ready for loan again. So let us know if you'd like to borrow it. And we actually also got 4 upgraded binoculars. So if you want to check some out because maybe your pair is not the best, or maybe you just want to try out a really nice pair, let us know too. Okay, so as far as what we're documenting in our data sheet, there's a number of different behaviors, and we'll kind of look through this really quick when I show the survey form. But you can kind of look through this list here. I will say that you won't see all of these during the course of the winter season. Some of these are pretty seasonal. A lot of these in this current list here probably is more of a springtime thing, but I think recently we were still seeing some vocalizing, which was a little unexpected. But yeah, this is a way for us to kind of know if there's anything interesting going on. All right, so yeah, I mentioned already kind of keeping an eye out, because being able to document whether we lose burrows, that's really key. We know that burrows are one of the limiting factors in the number of birds, because, well, you can't really have more birds if you have less burrows. So that's something to look out for. And then, some other common activities that we might see. Okay, someone's got a waterfront property and, oh, they just cut down some trees. Okay, well, that's maybe good for their view, but it might not be good for the habitat for other animals. So that would be something that you could certainly take a photo of. We're not in the business of, being the police. So, if it's something egregious enough, we can forward it to the appropriate people, but we're not going to be looking to have direct conversations with these people. And we do have outreach brochures. So if you don't have any and you feel like you would like some brochures, let us know. We have plenty. Those are great for people you might run into on the beach who are wondering what you're doing. And then, as this training is going to go over, we're going to look at a whole bunch of other seabirds that are going to be out there. It's, I kind of think of this time of year as being like a gala. There's a lot of birds with black and white. It's a very formal affair, and trying to figure out what they all are can be a challenge. So we're going to help you through that tonight. And last but not least, you can see the links for where to send all of your data and all of your information. So with that, we will get into, let me see, hide my control so I can get to the data sheet, which is here. Okay, we did a little bit of reformatting on the data sheet, even from the version that we issued just 2 months ago. So I'm still finalizing this. Thanks to Aiden, one of our current interns who could not be here tonight. She's actually in class right now, but she was really instrumental in helping to make this reformatted. A lot of this stuff is pretty much the same. It's relatively straightforward. I guess with Tide, there's one thing, actually, let me back up just a little bit. So team members, it's not explicitly stated in the protocol, but for team leads, go ahead and put an asterisk by your name. That way we know who to contact if we have questions about the data. Tide, that one, we have a website that we like to use. It's called deepzoom.com, and we find it really helpful to get really accurate tide measurements. And so for this field, you can use a plus sign. So say, for example, plus 7.0, and then you could use the carets to indicate if the tide's going out or if it's coming in. All right, moving on. So we have a new wave conditions section. And so this is taken from the Puget Sound Seabird Survey. It's an adaptation. It's not an exact replicate, but we put this in there because we felt like it was something important to document, because the wave conditions can affect the birds that we are actually able to see, but also the birds that are actually present. So as you can see down below, numbers of birds. If you're not sure, you can always record notes. We're going to add in some more room for notes at the end, but we did have notes at the end of the first page. And we took out the aggression category for bird behavior because, frankly, we've never really seen clear signs of that. And it's kind of something that's hard to really differentiate. So I figured, don't worry about that. But we still have all the other standard behaviors there, which you will inevitably see at some point, especially in the spring. All righty, down to habitat. Again, this stuff is, I think, fairly straightforward. If you have any questions about any of the parts of the protocol, feel free to use the chat. If you think of things later, feel free to send us an email. You can reach us at pigu@nisquallyestuary.org. And then we have a new section here. This is also still kind of a work in progress. I will have a final version of this survey form available by next week. But here's kind of a little sneak preview to it. And so this is just a little checklist. Well, it's actually more than a checklist. We're actually providing space so that you can write the numbers of the different species of birds that you're seeing out there. These are not all of the species. For example, we know there's more than just the hybrid gulls out there. There's the short-billed gulls. There's Bonaparte gulls, and there's probably one or two other gulls that we sometimes see. But obviously, Ann and Shannon will kind of help us with identifying some of these common species. So yeah, and here's where you can send us that information. So, alrighty. And Shannon, is there anything I did not cover that I should have covered in this section?
Just that safety is really important. So please do not go out when it's very stormy, either windy or, and I would, if possible, wait a day or so after heavy rains, because there could be some erosion or trees that aren't well secured. So we really care that you guys take care, stay safe.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because last winter we had some very significant erosion. I can't remember exactly when it was, but actually I do remember now. We had our white Christmas, which was kind of nice, but it was followed by a whole solid week of sub-freezing temperatures for every single day, all day. And that was a recipe for just some of the really major slides that we saw. So yeah, if we have a heavy rainstorm like we did last Friday, may not be the best idea to go out the very next day. Just that way, gives that hillside a chance to let go of all the water. And if the hillside needs to let go of itself, well, it can do that, and you won't be there to get taken out with it. So yeah, when you're out there, just kind of keep an eye on the bluff too. You never know when there might be a tree that's like, oh, it's going to start coming down. So yeah.
Also, if you're doing much walking at all, the rocks right after the tide goes out are very slippery, and on frosty mornings they're very slippery. And stairways can be extremely slick if either from ice or just moisture gets kind of moldy or algae or something. So hang on to the railings and take care of yourself. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Great. So we've covered protocol. We've covered the data sheet. We've talked about sort of the general principles of this survey, or at least this aspect of our general survey. So I will turn it over to Ann, and she will go ahead and get us started with some of the bird ID. So Ann, take it away.
Righty. So I'm going to bring up. All right. Do you folks see the first slide now?
Yep.
It's there. Okay.
Yes.
Good. That's odd. I may have to do a different. I think I have to start with it not in slide because it doesn't want to advance. So I'll have to go through this. And then start it. Now are you seeing it?
Yep.
Okay, let's see if it'll advance now. Okay, here we go. Here is a classic non-breeding plumage of a pigeon guillemot, but it's rare to get to see the red feet like that. So that's why I featured this one. It must have been clear water or something. So this was by Govinda. She's in on Whidbey Island. So what we see is the white wing patch, which usually shows a lot of white on the head and neck and underparts, and modeling for the rest of it. Now, I'm just going to show a few slides of non-breeding pigeon guillemots, and Shannon is going to give us a tour of more realistic conditions. So mine are all up close and obvious for studying, but she's going to give us the real McCoy. Here's another one. This is as white as they get. They always have some black, and they always have the white wing patch, usually. Here's a group that they still have some dark on their heads, so they're not not complete. And I don't know, I can't say whether they all go all the way to complete, white on the head or not. Shannon will discuss that. Here's a full winter plumage with a pretty white head. So they're white underneath. And here is the transition plumage when they're changing from breeding to non-breeding or back. Lots of blotchy spots. Okay, so we've got side by side. Basically, we're talking about, it looks like a different bird. You would not recognize it being the same bird, breeding plumage or non-breeding plumage. But we like this one with the wings up because it makes the wing patch so obvious, and it has the black slash mark in it. Now let's look at some of the cousins. Here's the rhinoceros auklets. If they're way out there, you may start to think, oh, that's a PIGU guillemot kind of plumage. They're called rhinos because they have a horn near the bill, but that doesn't show as much in the non-breeding. So here's just an example of the horn, but this is breeding. Just wanted you to see that. Oops, I wanted to give the description. These, I must have lost the slide there. These birds have a chunkier neck. It's a chunkier bird with a thick neck and a bigger head and a heavier bill. The littlest and smallest alcid, that's the family that PIGU guillemots belong to, is the marbled murrelet. Very rare, but we do see that on occasion. And by the way, Maria Ruth has written a book about the marbled murrelet as well. So this little guy is actually brown during the summer in breeding plumage, but this is what we see in the winter. Another black and white bird, got a thicker neck, might be sort of hunched looking, a shorter tail, a lot of white on the underneath parts, and looks like, and a little short black bill. And this is smaller than a PIGU guillemot. And then there's the mirrors, and they're larger than the PIGU guillemot. So the top two pictures are PIGU guillemots in some variety of plumage. And down below you have the non-breeding common mirror. Notice the eye slash, a line, dark line coming down from the eye. And the larger, longer, heavier bill. This bird is larger than a PIGU guillemot, and some black on the head. So that's the common mirror. Now we're going into some waterfowl. This is the common loon in wintertime. It's a large bird, a thick neck, and a sharp bill. And to me, they look like they ride low in the water. Some people maybe don't think that. I think just about every winter survey you have a good chance of seeing one or two or more loons. They're usually diving a lot. You can see them catch fish, and they're somewhat solitary. There'll be one over here and then one in another area. There's another couple pictures of the loon. He's part of a white collar, brownish gray. Now the grebes, this is the horned grebe. It's the smallest grebe, but it's a little bit bigger than PIGU guillemot. It's gray black. It has this cap. It is just on the top of the head. It has a longer neck than PIGU guillemot. A white neck and white on the lower part of her face. Oh my goodness, he caught a big fish. He's going to be working for a while trying to swallow that one. Now, the larger grebe is the western grebe. They're very elegant. We do see those in the wintertime at out in Elm Inlet. And by the way, the horn grebes, they are very common in the winter. They sometimes are actually mixed in with some pigeon guillemots and stuff. So you will definitely see those. You'll be lucky to get to see the western grebes. Very long neck, a dark cap again, an extremely long pointed bill. Black actually comes down below the eye on the western grebe. And then there's one more little grebe. This bird is often found in fresh water, but sometimes in quiet salt water. And they are usually solitary or one or two, not often in big flocks. This is a fairly small bird. They're really a lot of fun. You can see those on Capitol Lake and various lakes and so on. Okay, so now we've got all the grebes here and with some pigeon guillemots. So upper right is western grebe, upper left is orange grebe, and then the little brown guy is the pied-billed grebe on the left. And the other two pictures are non-breeding pigeon guillemots from a bit of a distance. So you can see the posture is quite different and the shape. And that's one thing to really look for, is shape. Because sometimes you will see only a silhouette. You know, it's not like, let's say a woodpecker with, you know, clear color markings like a red head. I mean, these are all gray, white, and black in the winter for the most part. And the markings may not be clear if the light is poor, but the shape is a big clue. Okay, some other ducks, sea ducks, and waterfowl. The scoters, this is the surf scoter, also very common in the winter, sometimes in very large numbers. The male is blackbird, has a large bill with a lot of orange on it. It has a white patch on the forehead and a white patch on the back of the head, and I'll show that in another photo. The female next to it just has a smudge under the eye and by the ear, white, but also big bill. So you see the one on the right side, from a distance, you can actually see the orange a long ways away. And the other thing that's obvious about all these birds is if there's a really strong white spot, that's going to show up a long ways away. There you can see the white on the back of the head, and that does show up a long distance away. And there aren't very many birds that have just, you know, white just on the back of their head. So that's pretty unique. This is a large duck. This is a bigger bird than a pigeon guillemot. And a more rare scoter is even larger. So this is the largest scoter, and it's called the white wing. And the white sometimes shows on the wing, and that's why we brought this bird in, because you know you have two birds with white wings. It doesn't always show. The part that does show is the white around the eye. And again, it has some yellow or orange on the bill. The female on the left has a couple smudges on the face. These are not as common. It's pretty cool when you get to see them. And here's a comparison between the surf scoter on the lower left and the white-winged scoter on the top. And there you can see the white on the wing. But it's nothing like the white patch on it. Nothing, you know, as large as the white patch on the pigeon guillemot. And here is a white-winged scoter compared to a pigeon guillemot in breeding plumage. Shannon will explain, but some of these do overlap at different times, even though, so they could be here at the same time, even though normally we would see that we're looking for the pigeon guillemot in non-breeding plumage, but as she will point out, they're often in breeding plumage after January. Okay, we have some little ducks. We have bufflehead, very common, and you folks have probably seen those around Capitol Lake, out on Red Inlet, and so on. So the male is a lot of white. So if you see a lot of white way out, it could, you know, with the shape of the duck, it probably is a male bufflehead. The females are much less distinctive. They are, a little more black, white, and gray, like a pigeon bill, but not the same shape as all. Because she got a little duck bill there. You don't have an Elsod's pointed bill. She does have a little white cheek, and one of the most common. Here's another female. White cheek. And smaller than the male. So they're sort of in the same size category as pigeon guillemots. And there's a bufflehead in white. Beautiful. Now we have the golden eyes. The common golden eye has a round white patch on the face, and it has clear white line down the side. A lot of white on the bottom. The female on the left has a dark bill, except for the tip, a good sized bill, a brown head, and their eyes do stand out. They get the name golden eye. The other golden eye is barrows. They're just beautiful. I love them. So notice, instead of the round patch on the cheek, you have a white crescent, and you have on the shoulder and back white dashes, slats or kind of ladder effect. That's the male, and the female again has a brown head, but the bill is lighter, and that's not real clear in that picture. So let's look at the females here. On the left, you have the common with a dark, heavier bill. On the right, you have the barrows with a mostly golden yellow bill, and it's a smaller bill. But it's not this perfect, you guys. It's not going to be that easy to see. So one way is just, okay, the males are obvious or much easier to tell. So, if there's a group of them and there's 2 or 3 male barrow goldeneye and a couple females, it might be somewhat safe to assume that, those are the females that belong with that. So that's one, that's another clue, is see who she's hanging out with. Here's the little ruddy duck that I sadly have not seen for quite a while, but I hope they're still out in the Elk Inlet. Another small duck. I think the giveaway on this one is that spiky pointy tail. And surprisingly, mallards are often in salt water. You think of them as a freshwater pond duck, but we see them every time we go to Young's Cove. They're either close to shore swimming or fairly close, or maybe on the beach. Widgeon is another dabbling duck that does not dive, that may spend some time in salt water, and so you could see those. Notice the male has a white stripe at the forehead and some green back in the eye. Yeah, so you will see those in salt water. Mergansers. This is the common merganser, which again you tend to think of as a freshwater bird, but we have families of mergansers that definitely live at Young's Cove. Every year the female comes by with at least 12 to 15 chicks. The male of this bird is stunning, and from a distance, the big white duck-shaped bird with a black head and a pointed red beak and lots of white on the body, probably a common merganser. The females all may have some kind of a crest. It says a shorter crest for the common, not always visible. In flight, the mergansers are just a straight arrow, absolutely straight, and much more light colored than, like when cormorants are going by or other darker birds. And when they're foraging, they just swim very slowly with the front part of their head in the water. They are searching for prey. Look at that spiky hairdo. It looks like she something fancy to it. Now, another one with a crest is the red-breasted merganser. The male also has a crest here, and it has an even longer, sharper bill. It's also red-orange. And this bird, again, and this bird has a white collar because it's not all white underneath. It's named. It has a reddish brown and mottled breast. So it's just sort of a collar, which shows on this picture here. You can see the sort of the white collar. And then the female again has a crest. Looks like there's a field mark of white right by the bill there. Jumping to cormorants. Cormorants are long-necked birds. They almost look like a little sea monster when they're almost underwater and just their neck standing up. Like, what was it, the Loch Ness monster or something. We have a hooked bill. And again, large numbers and very common. 50 or more or 100 may be in a long raft or flying by in groups of 8 to 10. And they are unusual in that their signature pose is with their wings out, drying like this. And the double-crested cormorant is our most common, lots of yellow on the bill. By far the most common. Majority of our cormorants are double-crested. And, you know, if you don't get to see pigeon guillemots fishing in the winter time as much, you can always watch cormorants fish. They really are good, and they get a lot of fish. Okay, we have our little gulls with our pigeon guillemots, and from a distance, yeah, they're not the same shape exactly, but there's a lot of white and gray there. So the two on the upper right are pigeon guillemots in non-breeding plumage, and the two lower ones are short-billed gull. They used to call it a PIGU gull. I always think these are cute little guys because they have long round heads, a small bill compared to our hybrid gull. So the one you normally see, the large bill, that's, you know, very noisy and on the beach a lot, and, you know, picking up shellfish and dropping them. That's our hybrid gull, our most common gull. And I don't have a picture here, but you'll see those every time you go out. But keep an eye out for these smaller, lighter colored gulls. And that's what I have. So there's a view of the mountains from Briscoe Point with lots of cormorants sitting up on top of the thing out there that protects boats. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shannon. Now, Shannon is an excellent photographer, and usually we like to show her best pictures. But we said just tonight we requested, Shannon, do you have some that may not be perfect, that might be more like what we were going to see out there, a long ways away, a little tricky? And I'm going to turn it over to Shannon now for a virtual field trip. I'll get a picture on my screen.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you're looking at a photo now. So I've been very fortunate to be out on the boat doing a lot of boat surveys. So I do see a lot of birds and a lot of guillemots all through the winter time. And this is kind of it's become a famous picture now because I know Terrence has shown it a few times, but I thought I would start out with it because it's a good photo to show the different types of plumage that we might see. So we have on the left, full non-breeding plumage, and then one that's in full breeding plumage and one that's in transition. And this photo was taken in February. So that just kind of gives you an idea that it's possible in the winter to see all three plumages. So that's the first one. This was taken near Briscoe Point. So you can see they're even pretty close to the beach in February. Hopefully this is going to work. So I just kind of put a bunch of photos at the beginning here that are a little closer up just to show the different plumages. This guy on the left is transitioning. Thought this guy was cute with his little polka dots. So this is one that was taken early in the fall. I suspect it's a juvenile because its feet are not very red. And you can see it's clearly confused as to what kind of plumage it has. I think it was maybe even a fledgling from that year that's now sort of in a juvenile stage. And this is the same bird when it jumped in the water. You can see a little bit of a wing bar here, but it's kind of raggedy. And again, I think the feet kind of tipped me off to it being a juvenile. This is another one from, I think, around February timeframe. So you can see this one bird is transitioning and the other one's a little further behind. Just some more views of plumage. This guy too. So this could be really tricky. You can see the lighting in this photo is not the greatest. It was probably a dark morning. In the winter, we have a lot of those dark mornings where the birds aren't quite lit up the way we would like. And so this guy really matches the water, which could make it from a distance hard to see. But I kind of tend to go on the shape of the bird. If I can't quite see it, I'm really relying on the shape. I'm not a true birder, so I just kind of, just from watching the birds a lot, you get to where you can just look up and say, oh, that's a scoter, or that's a guillemot, that's the grebe. Sometimes I have to take a photo and bring it home and look at it a little bit closer. But some more transitional plumage. Here's a transitional guy with fish. I do see birds all through the winter feeding themselves with fish, so that's just an interesting tidbit. I saw one on the wing last month with a fish in its mouth. So I thought that was interesting. I believe this one is a fledgling. I'm going to zoom in. You can see it has a really dark head, and then the back of the neck is pretty dark. There's really not much of a white wing patch. So I've noticed that these ones that look like fledglings tend to just kind of float along. They're not really actively moving anywhere. They're just kind of drifting a little bit. This is another one that I suspect is a fledgling. So we're past that time now, but I just thought I would include these because it does seem to be a very fleeting time when we see these guys in the early fall. I'll kind of zoom in here. Hopefully that zoom is working. But you can see how dark the head is and really not much of a wing patch there. Okay, so this is not a guillemot, but this is a red-necked grebe. So this is one of the birds you might see out there. It's larger than a horned grebe, but not as big as the western grebe. And again, with the grebes, I tend to notice that I can just look up and say almost instantly whether something's a grebe just because of the shape of the body and the way the neck is sticking up. So these, the lighting's okay. I think it's pretty clear that this is a grebe. This is a horned grebe. This is an eared grebe. This is not like from a distance, but I threw it in here because we don't see this one very often, but we do sometimes see them mixed in with the horned grebes. And he's just a little bit more mottled in his head. He doesn't have that really distinct line with the black and white. as the horned grebe or the western grebes. And he's also a very small bird. So this bird is a little bit bigger than a guillemot. But again, with the neck sticking up, that's a pretty good clue. Okay, so now we're getting to these kind of far away photos. So this would be one, I actually took this one from the beach. So you can see we've got one bird that's very white, really stands out that it looks different from the bird on the left. But these are both guillemots, and we can zoom in and see that they are both guillemots. Garnet, I think I took this one from Beechcrest actually. Okay, this is the same bird. I just wanted to show this one. From a distance, you can see that the belly is really white, but the wings look very dark actually. So when they have them tucked in, you may not appreciate that the wings are still pretty dark. But if you see a bird from a distance that's flapping, you'll see that he's got this very white belly, and then the wings are still pretty dark. And this is pretty characteristic of the guillemot. So if you see that behavior, although a lot of birds do that flapping, but guillemots all tend to look similar in that way. So this is a rhinoceros auklet. This is one that doesn't have all of its fancy breeding horns. So this is one that you might see in the off season. And these guys, I think from a distance, if it was dark, you might confuse these with a guillemot. But again, they're much stockier than the guillemot. So I would usually just go based on the shape of the head and the body. I believe this is another young bird. It's got the dark head, but you can see he's kind of squat in the water too. So his shape might look a little different, but I think it's just his posture. So this bird here, does anybody know what this is? This is actually a cormorant. It's a pelagic cormorant. And it does have a white wing patch, but it is a much larger bird than the guillemot. And of course it has a really long neck. So that's a pretty good giveaway. These we don't see as often as the double-crested cormorants, but we do see them throughout the winter. And I threw this one in here because I think this is a Brandt's cormorant, which I took in September actually, out by Devil's Head. So it would be possible to see one of these birds, but pretty rarely. So this is one of the golden eyes. This is the Barrow's golden eye, which you can tell because of this crescent shaped spot. And then this, what would you call this, Anne? The way the white is.
Slats or
Slats.
dashes.
I'm not very good with the bird terminology, but
a ladder back kind of a thing.
yeah. We don't see these as much as the common golden eyes, but we do see them. And these guys tend to stay close to shore, and they're usually in groups. I put this one in because the lighting is tricky. I think we were going to do a thing where people say guillemot or not, but yeah. So this is just what it might look like. This guy's also transitioning, it looks like, so could be tricky from a distance. Okay, how about this one? This is really what it looks like in the early morning in the winter when you barely have any light and you see a bird that's about the right size. But is it a guillemot?
Looks like.
So I'm going to zoom in with my binos. I think this is a redneck grebe. That would be my guess. He's got the neck. This would be a common goldeneye. I think it's actually a male that's in between stages. Okay, so this picture I threw in because it has a couple of different birds going on. Can anybody tell what these birds are in this photo? Does anyone want to take a guess? I just realized I can't see the chat on here. So how about this guy right here?
That's a female version of the other one. That is name I forgot. Right?
So this is actually a male.
Oh,
I can see the chat.
I thought the males had
Oh,
like
yeah,
white
okay.
cheeks.
Garnet has grebe and scoter. That's correct. Yeah, this I think is another redneck grebe here, and this is a. These are both male surf scoters. You can see they're really distinctly black and white. And this one you can see the white spot on the back of the head, and this one has the white on the forehead that you can see. The females are more brown and kind of drab. And then here's our guillemot hanging out. These are the barrows, golden eyes again. Okay, so I just took this one recently out on a survey. Does anybody know what these guys are? This is a big bird, I should mention.
Come on, don't be shy. Shout it out. Take a guess.
I think this is the biggest grebe. Is that right, Anne? Are these the biggest?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
The western grebe.
Right.
And this is kind of a rare sighting for us. We mostly see horned grebes when we're out on survey. So this was kind of a treat to see these guys come cruising by. And again, on the boat, we see a lot more than you do from the shore. We're kind of spoiled that way. But you might see some, you never know. So what would you say about this guy here? Ooh.
Good one.
The light's kind of tricky.
Looks like a good one to me. I guess it does pick it up when she shout. That does look like a good one.
I would say this one's probably transitioning. I think he was feeding himself. Oh, this is a bird that we didn't talk about before. Does anyone know what this guy is here? Kind of has really
A loon. I didn't memorize the birds yet, but I'm gonna go with loon.
It's not a loon. Garnet's close. Not a cackling goose, but this is a brant, which is a type of goose, I believe. We'll zoom in, get out our binos. Oop. Really pretty bird. We see these every so often. So if it looks similar to a cackling goose, which is a small Canada goose, but it's just a little different, it might be a brant. Can anybody guess what this guy is here?
A golden eye bird.
It is a goldeneye.
I don't remember it.
Know which kind? This one has a round white spot versus the crescent.
Burrowhead.
So this is the common goldeneye. The Barrows has the crescent shaped white. I don't know what you call that thing. Spot. I need to take a class on that. How about this guy here? We saw this one earlier. It's related to the pigeon guillemot.
Is it a murrelet?
Pardon?
Is it a murrelet?
No, it is, it's a rhino auklet. Yep, Garnet's right. That's a rhino auklet.
Hmm.
Yep, it's also related to the marbled murrelet, but the murrelet's probably half the size of this bird, I would guess. Maybe a little bit more than half the size. Yeah, it really helps to see the scale. It's hard with these photos because we're not seeing the birds next to each other, but. So this guy here is very white. I think Anne mentioned something earlier about if they ever get fully white, some of them, and my observations have been, there are just some birds that never turn this white all through the winter. They stay kind of sooty and smudgy. But then some get really white like this. I don't know if it has to do with their age or what the story is on that. It would be nice to know if we could tag some of these guys. Some more grebes. Oh, okay. What's this one? I think. I think some of you might know what this guy is. This is a really big bird. This might be the biggest bird you'll see on the water. And this, the light's good in this photo, but when the light's low, if you look out and just see a really big bird on the water, it's often this bird, which is the common loon. This is another loon, but it's a red-throated loon, which you will not see very often, but it's possible. This one has, his neck stands up a little bit higher. Here's just another sort of low light photo, but you can see they all have different variations of black and white. So some are going to be really white and some, like this guy right here, is still pretty dark on the head. Does anyone know what this little one is? Little cutie.
Buffalo heads.
Bufflehead. Yeah, that's a bufflehead.
Yes.
And these guys are similar size to the guillemots, but as you can see, their shape is very different. So if you're out on the water in low light, I would just go by the shape. They have a really round head and a little duck bill. Okay, so this is kind of a challenging picture. And you can see from a distance, it's actually kind of hard to tell what's what in this photo, but can anybody just take a guess from, just based on like the size and shape, what these might be? I can zoom in a little bit too. Let's see if that'll, oops. Or do we have any guillemots in this picture? I guess I should ask that question.
It looks like cormorants to me. They're longer necks, but it's hard to tell. You can't really see all that much.
Yeah, it's tough when they're that far away. And the size of them kind of gets distorted as well. I would guess those larger black birds are cormorants. That would be my guess. But we do have two guillemots here. And you can see they're in different plumage.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look how they don't look that much smaller
Mm.
than the cormorants when they're far away like that. Oh, so Anne, I was able to throw in a couple of gulls here.
Thank you. Cool.
So this, I believe, is a hybrid gull, which some folks call Olympic gull. I think it's a cross between a glaucous wing and a Western.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Notice how the
He's
Bill is-
transitioning a little bit, but
bill is so much larger
Mhm.
and heavier than on that small, short bill. So,
and then this is a short bill gull. They're little cuties. Oh, and this is the Bonaparte's gull, which I've only seen once. I saw these out in the boat with Terrence on a survey. And that was a treat. These guys are pretty small, so they're going to be actually similar in size to the Guillemot. So I think when we first saw these, we were a little bit puzzled as to what they were because they were so small. And from a distance, I mean, even like the head shape is kind of similar, but you can see, you know, the back end of them here is different. Clearly the shape is different there. So, and you might see these in a big flock if you were to see them. So I think that's the last photo I have.
great. Thanks, Shannon. You know, she referred to a few things that are issues. One is size. If you don't have anything to compare with, you're just guessing. You're, you know, relative to whatever is there. Also, with the waterfowl, keep in mind which ones are dabbling ducks and which ones are diving ducks. I mean, that will help a little bit in identifying them because the scoters and the goldeneye and the bufflehead, let's see, and the mergansers, all of those ducks are sea ducks. They're diving ducks, and they are such a challenge. You just start to get focused in on it, and it dives. So you don't get a good look at all. Then it comes up way over here. You find it again, and it dives. I mean, it's just, and that's true of the grebes as well. They do a lot of diving. So that just adds to the to the challenge.
It can be
And
really
then-
tricky in low light for sure. So sometimes you just have to go off of a silhouette.
Yes, absolutely.
Things like scoters or grebes, you can tell pretty quickly based
That's
on
right.
their shape.
Yeah. Distance, we do not even encourage you to try to identify stuff if it's so far out that you know you really can't tell. Don't worry about it. Just the ones that are close enough for you to, you know, be pretty sure, either by shape or whatever. You can make notes about a bird that you can't identify, but you know, don't put it in the count if you're not pretty sure. Now, Terrence, do we still have a copy of that card that Sam made? Because it included quite a few of these.
I've not been able to track down the right one.
Okay,
We
I
can,
have a
we can.
physical copy. I don't know if it can be scanned or what, or if we should try to get the electronic version from Sam.
Yeah,
But that's it's a nice little two-sided ID sheet with quite a few of these birds, and it, you know, it's handy. You could print out a copy or you know, to have with you or just study it on your computer if we are able to find it. And I have a couple here. We laminated them at one time. Yeah,
one, and,
yeah, that's it.
okay,
You can see, yeah, it's not all of them, but it's just a handful. And some of the ones that have, you know, black and white, but in different ways, and you can compare and see how they differ from the Guillemot. Well, thank you so much for coming. What else do we need to cover, Terrence?
Well, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but we did want to allow for questions.
Good idea.
We're certain that there's plenty of, so feel free to just put it out there, use the chat, raise your hand, whatever you want to do.
Well, back to what you were just talking about, a little guide or even just a few sheets of photographs that we could take down with us. Because until you've actually seen it really in real life, and you can tell by whatever the markings are or whatever, it doesn't really stay with you until you've really seen.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and we would also offer to, if you feel like you would want one of us to come out with you, we're more than happy to do field training. Because obviously every colony is a little bit different. Some birds you really don't see except for maybe a couple places, and then there's some birds that are just common everywhere. So Kathy, we'll go ahead and mail out a copy of our laminated field guide so you can take that with you when you're doing surveys.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and go ahead and contact us to schedule a time, any of you. We'd be happy to. It's just always fun for us too to get out to a different location and see what kind of birds are there.
Thank you.
And the reverse is true too. If you want to tag along with us when we're doing our surveys, we're more than happy to provide that additional training so that you can get better at birds. I mean, to be honest, when I first started doing winter surveys, I was nowhere near to my level of bird ID for winter ducks compared to how I am now. And it really just kind of took, learning a couple here, a couple there. And then, over time, as you learn, it becomes easier because, probably peak season when there's just a whole handful of different species, like Ann says, they're all diving and popping up in different places, and that can make it really challenging to try and get a good idea, especially when you might not have the best light conditions. There might be chop on the water. Any number of variables can make it pretty challenging to sometimes tell them apart. So yeah.
Yeah, if there's whitecaps, the guillemots, they like to ride it, but they're going to disappear below the wave, and then they'll come up, and that's true. All the small birds. Yeah, we'd be happy to come out or have you come with us. Yeah. Thinking of a special. There's other areas too that we can look from. There's several species at North Point, which is out by Hearthfire. There's that's a good place to see quite a few common species. And the marinas might be good spots too, the marinas. Yeah, the more experience you can get, just going a lot of different places. And, every time we go, we learn something new.
Yeah, and if you're interested in coming out on boat surveys with us, let us know, because like Shannon was saying, we tend to see a larger number of birds as well as a greater variety of birds. Some of the birds that we see on the boat are birds that we don't typically see on land. So it's kind of a neat experience too, because like you said, you just never know what you might see. I mean, I know Shannon has seen marble murrelet. She's seen redneck phalarope, the Bonaparte skulls. Yeah, you kind of, the more water you can cover, the more birds you can see. And we get to see, I don't know, I mean, at least a handful of guillemots every time out that we're on the boat. Just depends on where we go and how long we're out there. But yeah, the further away you get from the beach, the more birds you tend to see, which is kind of interesting. So.
Mhm. Another opportunity might be the Christmas bird count, which is usually around the 18th or 20th of December. It's usually darn cold and miserable because you're just standing around all day waiting for birds to show up. That's both terrestrial and seabirds. But yeah, there's a couple places where they do that. That the Evergreen Beach is one spot that, you know, just across from inlet from Young's Cove, that you can see quite a few as well.
Yeah. So there'd be other people there who were much more knowledgeable to help you. With
Yeah, it's not a teaching situation because they are on a mission, you know.
Okay.
Christmas bird count, they're just counting. But you know, you can be a fly on the wall, be a shadow.
Yeah, it would be like an observation thing. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, just one or two extra people, you know, with each team. But it would be an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah, and I guess on that note, if you're really interested in getting really good with your bird ID or just getting to see a lot of birds all at once, highly recommend the Puffin Express. That is a boat cruise that I believe it departs from Port Townsend. But it goes out to the Protection Island area, the Strait of Juan de Fuca. I haven't been on the Puffin Express, but I've been out on a different boat and I've been out to that area. And oh my gosh, it's like bird city out there in wintertime. Like this time of year, there are just an amazing variety of, I mean, like there's multiple species of loons, 2 species of murrelets. It's Greenland Central, and there's, yeah, there's almost any kind of bird that you can see down here. You will see that and much more. It's really an amazing experience. So even if it's cold and blustery like we're having conditions now, I mean, those birds are just thick. So.
Okay, I'll check that out.
I would also say if you guys have the ability to take photos, if there are any birds that you don't know or can't ID, even if it's a really bad photo, you'd be surprised, you know, if you bring it back or even send it to one of us and we can kind of blow it up. Often you can figure out what it is that way. So sometimes I do that. I'll just snap a quick pic and then bring it home with me and try to figure it out at that point.
So even with a phone camera?
That might be a little dicey, but you can try it. You never know. Sometimes you'd be surprised. You know, if you bring it and show it to Terrence or Anne or send it to one of us, we can try to blow it up, and just going off the shape, we might be able to ID it.
Okay.
So
another good opportunity is sometime in the winter is the Olympic Bird Festival, which is held up at Squim, and they do have field trips to several marinas and places and the classes, and they do take a boat out to Protection Island as well. That's one of the field trips. It's 2 or 3 days. It's a whole weekend. I mean, you know, you have to stay over. That's when I first got introduced to distant birding, you know, by a scope. It was like unbelievable. Yeah, so there's a lot of bird festivals, and those can really be helpful.
All right, so I know we're over time, so I do apologize, but thank you all for staying on. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. And I put it in the chat, but I'll mention it as well. We're going to make copies of our data sheet and our protocol and other resources available on our website. That might take a little bit longer. So in the meantime, I will work on sending out an email update next week with all of the materials that you might need for the survey attached to that. For folks who have requested a physical copy of the laminated guide, I will go ahead and get in touch with you and make sure that we can either mail it out or you can come to the Nature Center and you can come pick it up. So, Shannon, any last words?
I think you've covered it pretty much. Just, yeah, you guys watch for the stuff to come out by the emails and hopefully get you equipped, and let us know if you don't get what you need.
All right. Yeah. Thank you all for coming, and have a good evening and have a good season out there. Hope you see lots of guillemots. Well, maybe not lots, at least some. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you need support in any way. We're happy to do so, whether that's equipment, whether that's training. Yeah, so.
So Terrence, for now, we want them to hold on to their paper field sheet, and those that are using the current Google form can continue to do that until you let us know the other form is ready, right?
That is
Or
correct.
data.
We had hoped to have a survey 123 form ready to go. We ran into a little hitch today. We were hoping that it would be available, which it's essentially done. It's just there's some technical issues that we'll need to work through. We've already kind of got that process started, so we will update you. I don't expect that we will have it fixed by next week when the email update comes out, but we are very hopeful that by the end of the year, we will be able to have thoroughly beta tested this new form, and it will be available to all the volunteers who have been doing the summer surveys. So if you've done summer surveys and you use Survey 123, this will be only just a little bit different. The content will be different, but the user interface will pretty much be the same. And it doesn't exactly mirror the physical paper data sheet that we're using, but it does contain the same exact information. It's just in a different format. So we're really excited for this to launch, and yeah, so thank you again, and we'll see you all later.
Take care.
Good night.
Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.